When you see a woman going through the hardest season of her life, don't assume God has forgotten her. Sometimes, what looks like abandonment is actually preparation, because the woman God chooses to use isn't the one who has it all together. She's the one who has been taken apart and rebuilt with heaven's blueprint. If your world feels like it's crumbling right now, this message is for you. Because the breaking you're experiencing might not be your ending. It could be your beginning. Here's what most people don't understand about God's process. He doesn't choose the qualified, He qualifies the chosen. And that qualification process often looks nothing like what we expect. It doesn't happen in comfort zones or easy seasons. It happens in the wilderness, in the waiting rooms, in the places where everything you thought you knew about yourself gets challenged. The woman God wants to use has to be emptied before she can be filled. She has to be stripped of her own strength before she can carry His power. And yes, that process is painful, but it's not pointless. Think about Hannah. For years, she endured the agony of barrenness while watching other women hold what she desperately wanted. Society mocked her. Her husband's other wife tormented her. Even the priest questioned her faith. But in that place of deepest pain, Hannah learned to pour out her heart to God in a way that moved heaven itself. Her breaking became the birthplace of her miracle. Or consider Esther. She was torn from everything familiar, thrust into a foreign palace, forced to compete for a king's attention she never asked for. Every comfort zone was shattered. Every security was stripped away. But it was that very process that positioned her to save an entire nation. Had she remained comfortable in her old life, she never would have been in place for such a time as this. The breaking isn't random, it's intentional. God knows exactly what He's doing when He allows pressure to build in a woman's life. He's not being cruel, He's being careful, because the assignment He has waiting for her requires a woman who knows how to lean on Him completely. When life starts falling apart, we tend to think we're doing something wrong. We assume we're being punished or that God is distant. But what if the opposite is true? What if the breaking is actually evidence that God is getting ready to use you in ways you never imagined? The process always starts the same way. God begins by touching the areas where we've placed our confidence. Career gets shaken. Relationships shift. Health gets challenged. Finances become uncertain. The very things we thought we could count on start feeling unstable. And we panic. We fight to hold on to what's slipping away. We try to fix what God is allowing to break. But here's what we miss. He's not trying to destroy us. He's trying to detach us from anything that might compete with Him for first place in our hearts. Sarah learned this lesson the hard way. She had her own plan for fulfilling God's promise. She would use Hagar as a surrogate. It seemed logical, practical, even spiritual. But God's plan required something different. It required Sarah to let go of her own understanding and trust His timing completely. The breaking of her self-reliance became the foundation of her faith. Mary experienced it too. She was engaged, planning a quiet life with Joseph, expecting normalcy. Then an angel showed up with news that would change everything. Her reputation would be questioned. Her engagement would be threatened. Her entire future would be uncertain. But in that moment of surrender, when she said yes to God's plan despite the cost, she stepped into the greatest calling any woman has ever received. The breaking always targets the same thing: pride, self-sufficiency, the illusion that we can handle life on our own terms. God knows that as long as we think we have it figured out, we'll never fully depend on Him. And a woman who doesn't depend on God completely cannot carry the weight of His purposes effectively. That's why He allows the pressure. Not because He enjoys watching us struggle, but because He knows what we're capable of when we're operating in His strength instead of our own. He sees the woman we can become when pride no longer blocks the flow of His power through us. Look at Rahab. She was living in sin, trapped in a lifestyle that society had labeled her with permanently. But when crisis came to Jericho, her old life was shattered completely. Everything she had known was about to be destroyed. Yet in that moment of complete vulnerability, she chose to align herself with God's people. Her breaking became her breakthrough, and she ended up in the lineage of Jesus himself. The same pattern appears with Ruth. She lost her husband, her security, her homeland. Everything familiar was stripped away. She could have stayed bitter, could have blamed God for her circumstances. Instead, she chose loyalty over comfort, faith over fear. That choice in her season of breaking positioned her for a love story that would be told for generations. This is what happens when a woman stops fighting the process and starts trusting it. The breaking that felt like punishment begins to reveal itself as preparation. The pain that seemed pointless starts producing purpose. The wilderness that looked like abandonment becomes the place where intimate relationship with God is born. But here's the part most people miss. The breaking doesn't just happen once, it's an ongoing process. Every new level of calling requires a new level of surrender. Every increased assignment demands increased dependence. God will continue to touch areas of self-reliance as long as He has work for us to do. That's why some women seem to go through multiple seasons of difficulty. It's not because God is angry with them or because they keep doing something wrong. It's because He keeps seeing more potential in them. The woman who can handle small assignments gets prepared for bigger ones. The woman who proves faithful in little gets trusted with much. And the beautiful thing is, each breaking becomes easier to navigate. Not because the circumstances become less challenging, but because your confidence in God's goodness becomes unshakable. You start recognizing the pattern. You begin to understand that when everything feels unstable, it usually means God is about to do something new. The woman God wants to use isn't the one who has never been broken. She's the one who has learned to find strength in the breaking. She's discovered that her weakness is the perfect place for His power to be displayed. She's realized that when she has nothing left to offer except her yes, that's when God can do His greatest work through her. So if you're in a season where everything feels uncertain, where your old normal no longer exists, where you're having to rebuild from scratch, pay attention. You might be experiencing God's preparation process. He might be getting ready to use you in ways that require the woman you're becoming, not the woman you used to be. The breaking isn't your enemy, it's your invitation. An invitation to discover what you're truly made of when you stop leaning on what you thought made you strong and start drawing from the source of all strength. An invitation to step into a version of yourself that can carry weight you never knew you had the capacity for. Because when God breaks a woman, He's not trying to diminish her. He's trying to expand her capacity to hold what's coming next. The vessel has to be reshaped before it can contain the new wine He wants to pour through her life. This is where most women get confused about the process. They think the breaking means they've done something wrong, that God is disappointed with them, that they've somehow fallen out of His favor. But the truth is exactly the opposite. The woman God is breaking is often the woman He's about to promote. Think about it this way. When you see construction happening on a building, you don't assume the building is being destroyed. You recognize that something new is being built. The noise, the mess, the apparent chaos, it's all part of creating something better than what was there before. That's exactly what God does in the life of a woman He's preparing for greater purpose. Naomi understood this eventually. She lost her husband, then both her sons. She was left with nothing but grief and 2 daughters-in-law in a foreign land. She even changed her name to Mara, which means bitter, because life had dealt her such a crushing blow. But God wasn't finished with her story. Through Ruth's loyalty and Boaz's kindness, Naomi discovered that her breaking had positioned her family line to produce kings. What felt like an ending was actually a setup for legacy. The same thing happened with Hagar. Cast out into the wilderness with her son, abandoned and desperate, she thought she was experiencing rejection. But in that desert place, God met her personally. He spoke to her directly, made promises about her future, and called her by name. The breaking that looked like banishment became the beginning of her own covenant relationship with the Almighty. Here's what you need to understand about God's timing. He never wastes a season. Every wilderness has a purpose. Every delay has a design. Every detour is actually leading somewhere specific. The woman who learns to trust the process instead of fighting it, discovers that God's plans are always bigger than her problems. But the breaking doesn't just prepare you for future assignments, it also reveals what was already inside you that you never knew existed. Pressure has a way of showing you what you're really made of. When everything external is stripped away, you discover the internal strength that God placed in you from the beginning. Jochebed learned this when Pharaoh's decree threatened her newborn son. Everything in her circumstances said there was no hope, no way to protect him, no future for her family. But desperation became the birthplace of creativity. She wove a basket, covered it with tar, and placed her baby in the Nile River, trusting God to do what she couldn't. That act of faith in her breaking moment preserved the future deliverer of Israel. The woman God is breaking today is being prepared for assignments that require supernatural wisdom, unusual courage, and unshakable faith. These qualities aren't developed in comfortable circumstances. They're forged in the fire of difficulty, shaped in the pressure of impossible situations, and refined through seasons that test everything you believe about God's goodness. That's why the enemy fights so hard against women who are in breaking seasons. He knows what God is preparing them for. He understands that a woman who has been through God's refining process becomes dangerous to his kingdom. She's no longer impressed by his threats because she's seen God's faithfulness in her darkest hours. She's no longer intimidated by his schemes because she's learned to recognize God's voice above all the noise. When Deborah stepped into leadership over Israel, it wasn't because she lived a perfect, comfortable life. It was because she had learned to hear God's voice clearly and trust his strategies completely. When Abigail intervened to save her household from David's anger, it wasn't because she had always been in positions of influence. It was because crisis had taught her how to think quickly and act wisely under pressure. The breaking process also does something else that's crucial for the woman God wants to use. It develops her compassion. A woman who has never experienced pain cannot effectively minister to others who are hurting. A woman who has never felt desperate cannot relate to those who are at the end of their rope. A woman who has never been broken cannot help others put the pieces of their lives back together. God uses broken women to heal broken people. He sends the woman who has walked through the valley to guide others who are just entering it. He appoints the woman who has survived the storm to be a lighthouse for those still caught in the winds. Her scars become her credentials, her testimony becomes her authority, her survival becomes someone else's hope. But here's the part that separates the women God uses from the women who just endure. It's not enough to survive the breaking. You have to let it change you. You have to allow the pressure to produce something new instead of just something bitter. You have to choose growth over resentment, wisdom over wounds, purpose over self-pity. The woman who emerges from God's breaking process isn't the same woman who entered it. She's been reconstructed from the inside out. Her confidence is no longer in her circumstances, but in her Creator. Her security is no longer in what she can control, but in the one who controls all things. Her strength is no longer in her own abilities, but in the unlimited power of the God who lives within her. This is why God breaks the woman he wants to use. Not because he delights in her pain, but because he sees her potential. Not because he wants to limit her, but because he wants to launch her into dimensions of purpose she never imagined possible. Not because she's not good enough as she is, but because he knows she's capable of becoming more than she ever dreamed. So if you're in the breaking right now, if everything feels uncertain and unstable, if you're wondering where God is in the middle of your mess, remember this. The same hands that are allowing the pressure are the hands that will shape you into something beautiful. The same God who permits the breaking is the God who will use the breaking to prepare you for breakthrough. The question isn't whether you'll survive this season. If God is in it, you will. The question is what kind of woman you'll be when you come through it. Will you be bitter or better? Will you be wounded or wiser? Will you be broken down or broken open? Because there's a difference between being broken down and being broken open. Broken down leads to despair. Broken open leads to destiny. The woman God wants to use isn't destroyed by her difficulties. She's developed by them. Your breaking isn't your disqualification, it's your preparation. The woman God chooses to use isn't the one who avoided the fire, she's the one who came through it, refined. So if you're in that season right now, don't despair. Your greatest assignment might be waiting on the other side of your surrender. Drop transformed if this hit your spirit, and remember, when God breaks you, He's not breaking you down. He's breaking you open.